Okay, welcome. I think we've made this work this time. You should be able to hear me now. It's Tuesday, just after 6. I'm Dr. Phil Parker, and once again, we're doing a live session all about how to thrive and survive during lockdown, full of practical tools and tips and ideas to help you to manage your health, your mental and physical well-being in this slightly crazy time. So welcome. If you found your way here, congratulations. You're already winning. We're going to cover loads of stuff today, and some of it's going to be based on questions that have come in. I've had lots of questions over the last couple of weeks. You know, we've been running this for 9 weeks, so we're starting to get our heads around it. Hello, Jenny. I'll wave at people occasionally to show that I'm here and paying attention. So do leave comments. Had questions coming in, and a lot of the questions over the last week have been about stress, which is kind of unsurprising because here we are, certainly in the UK. I know people are listening around the world. Welcome. We have been doing this for 9 weeks now, and we've kind of run out of board games, food to cook that's slightly different from the thing we had yesterday. We're hanging around with the same people, so how are we going to survive? So it's a question that people are asking, and also a lot of people are asking, how do we cope with the uncertainty of the fact that things aren't changing at the speed that we want to, and slightly on the horizon, we may be getting back into some of the old environments we used to be in. How am I going to deal with that? I know a number of people have found that lockdown is actually, they've really quite enjoyed it. They're quite quiet about it. I don't want to tell anybody, but I quite actually like being in lockdown, because when you're in lockdown, certain things that you normally have to deal with in life have gone. And as we know, one of the things that very often people will do when they have a problem is they'll exit, they'll leave. So they'll leave relationships, leave difficult jobs, leave situations that are tricky, which is a fine solution, except it doesn't work in lots of ways, because you often bring the problem around with you, because sometimes it's about how you're being. But in lockdown, we're allowed to be in this position where we don't have to go out, we don't have to deal with other people, we can kind of avoid these things, and people are starting to. Some people are liking that and starting to get a little bit worried about, well, what happens when we open the doors and have a look out again. Hey, there's some great people on the call. I haven't seen you guys for ages. My very good friend Jackie, welcome Jackie. Glad to see you're out of your PJs for once. And the lovely Edward. Hello, Edward. Am I right in thinking, Edward, you're in the Isle of Wight, or is that my imagination? If it is, are you using the app? And Sharon, hello Sharon, and Fleur, and Mary, lots of people, great to see you, and Charlene, hello. And Christy. So we're going to be covering some of the questions people have had about all that kind of stuff. How do I deal with the madness? How do I deal with the impending madness as we go out? And you may like my new room. Do you like my room? I've obviously been decorating whilst being locked down. You may know this is completely untrue, and it's actually a green screen, as you can see as I put this slightly green book. You can see that actually it's covering up what is a rather ugly set of blue wardrobes. Hello, Sarah. Yeah, Edward is in the other way. Excellent. So let's begin. I want to spend a chunk of time towards the end on de-stressing, relaxing, and particularly sleep, which is something that people keep on asking me about. And we know, a lot of the stuff I'm talking about is how we manage our health, both from physical well-being, which is actually one of the easiest things to do. People know how to eat well, exercise well, and the mental mind aspects of physical and mental well-being, because we know, as I often say, that our mind affects our body and our body affects our mind, and we're less good at managing that kind of stuff You know, we know how to put on gym shoes and run. We don't know how to get to sleep. We don't know how to de-stress. Most of us are not that skilled. I know on the call, some people are practitioners. They do know about this kind of stuff, but they will know that most people don't know how to do it. And kind of one of the themes that I talk about a lot, and a lot of the courses I run is like, these are the skills we needed to learn at school that we never got taught, and they're kind of really, really important. We've got some extra stuff here. Just kind of a quick look. Jenny likes the picture. I'll show you the picture. It's somebody else's room. It's quite weird. I'm actually living in somebody else's living room. I don't know what the books are, probably in Norwegian. We got Anne from Switzerland. Hello, Anne. Lovely to see you. And Teresa wants to know about panic attacks at night with sleep. Excellent. And Lucinda. From Newcastle, her osteopath did NLP training with me. That must be the lovely Martin, I would imagine. Everyone knows Martin. So I'll quickly talk about panic attacks actually at night with sleep, because that's an interesting conversation. We can manage absolutely to switch off, turn down, resolve panic attacks. Really, really easy to do if you know how, and we'll be covering some of that stuff. But it's really tricky, of course, if you're doing it when you're asleep, because when you're asleep, it's your unconscious mind is just generating all sorts of stuff. Who knows why? Some people think it's processing stuff. Some people it's your deep unconscious fears. Nobody really knows, of course. But we can't really be responsible for what we're thinking about when we're dreaming. I don't know if you've ever had this experience when you wake up from sleep, and I had it the other day, where I cheated on my wife with, you know, a very long-term ex-girlfriend from the past, and was like, oh my God, that's just a dream. Your unconscious mind will take you in all sorts of places. It doesn't necessarily mean anything. That's just what happens. But it can trigger exactly the same experiences as if we were conscious and awake. And I think I've said this before as well, just before we wake up, so, you know, probably within a couple of hours of waking, our cortisol levels increase and our adrenaline levels also increase a bit in kind of preparation for being awake, so that we don't wake up like this. We wake up like that because if we're on the savannah and there's some wild beast, we need to be on it. And so we have a natural physiological response which tends to build our alertness. And if you spent the whole day yesterday being in a high state of arousal, then what happens is in the morning, in that kind of pre-waking time, you're just topping up levels that are already quite high, and then when you do wake up, you're like, whoa, and then you can be in all sorts of, you know, crazy thoughts. Once you're awake, you can start to calm it down. Let's see what else is happening here. Yeah, Martin, lovely Martin. Everyone knows Martin. Well, not everyone, but a lot of the people on the call know the lovely Martin. Margaret's been having strange dreams. Excellent. Sharon's saying she's got. Did you go say an exam? Did I see that? Exam tomorrow. Mary and I have an exam tomorrow. Relaxation. We're definitely going to do some relaxation. I'm going to spend probably the last half an hour of this helping you to really calm down and relax. Do you know, we talked earlier about people aren't very good at learning to relax. This is probably one of the reasons that people drink, eat, become hypnotized by the TV, or do one of the most popular sports in Britain, which is angling, you know, fishing. Because when you fish and you know, let's say you're just dropping a little float in the river, and you just look at it and maybe the water flows past. Now all these things are actually really brilliant ways to induce trance. So trance means it's very similar to flow state, which some of you have heard about. Flow or trance is defined as a limited focus of attention where you become more aware of often what's in front of you, but you kind of become unaware of everything else. You tend to be very still. You tend to have a focus on that thing, and things that move in and out of your field of vision don't really catch your attention. Time seems to stand still, and everything often seems to slow down. You become very immersed in it. And actually, in my PhD, I talked about how flow states, which some of you will know, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi as an interesting name to conjure with, who was one of the founders of positive psychology, came up with the idea of flow states, and all the qualities of flow states are very, very similar to the qualities of what you recognize as a hypnotic trance or meditative state, or one of those things. In fact, I was reading some interesting stuff about a guy called Milton Erickson, who is somebody that a lot of my work is based on. A very, very prominent psychiatrist in the States, lived in Phoenix, Arizona. Many on the call will know about him, and he defined himself. And I'll get the numbers wrong here, but he defined himself as being 70% Norwegian, 30% German, and 4% Native American, which obviously adds up to more than 100%. But he was very interested in the local Native American culture, and actually did some studies on what traditional healing techniques there were within the Native American population that he could identify was similar to what he did around helping people into hypnotic or trance states. Very interesting guy. It's Carolyn's there as well. Excellent. So yeah, it being the flow state, being in the state of calmness. So when you imagine someone's fishing and they're just sitting there looking at the little thing bobbing up and down, that actually generates a lot of the neurology that is equivalent to a flow state or a meditative state or a trance state or a prayer state, or if you're a whirling dervish state. So understanding how we can manage our states will be really useful. And as I say, we're going to spend probably about half an hour. I'm going to talk you through some stuff. So for that half an hour, from about 6:30, what I recommend you do is, if as much as you can, switch off the distractions. Put headphones on if you can get headphones. That will just allow you to focus on this rather than the ambient noise, and that will encourage this kind of focus that would be good for you. Make sure you're not driving a car while you do it, or operating dangerous machinery, or running the country, anything like that. So that's what we're going to do in the second half. We're going to look at sleep, we're going to look at de-stressing, calming down, and what I'd like you to do is to request your unconscious mind, which is the part of you that takes care of you. It's the part of you that knows stuff like if you see a little movement in this, as you walk down the street, you see something, you're aware of it and deciding whether it's threatening or it's a squirrel or whatever. It's the part that allows you to raise your blood pressure when you climb stairs, or when you sleep, to breathe, all sorts of stuff. So allow your unconscious mind, request that it pays attention to whatever I say in the way that's most useful for you, depending on what's going on for you, because everyone on the call will have different things that are going on. So just ask your unconscious mind to pay attention in a way that's most useful for you. Edward has mindfulness is a form of focused attention. Yeah, excellent. I think I talked on the very first episode of this years back, 9 weeks ago, when just talked about a simple technique, the kind of yogic breathing technique, which is just counting your breath in and then counting it out. Just doing that. It's a kind of really basic practice. So some specific questions. Let me grab my specific questions. Okay, a couple of interesting ones here. My co-workers are lying about how much they're socially distancing. They won't tell the truth about it. I don't quite know what to do about it. Another one, also in a similar kind of vein. I'm a bit worried about going back to work. I'm liking this social isolation. When I go back to work, I've got to deal with bitchy people, gossipy people, people who are difficult or toxic. And then another one which kind of is linked to it, which is how to deal with jealousy. Somebody sent me a message saying, I've got a friend who's got jealousy, and I'm never sure when people say that if they really have a friend or not. I mean, I probably do have a friend, but whether it's the friend who has jealousy or them, well, maybe they can let me know privately or on the messages. So I'm putting these three things together because to some extent they're linked in that they're about other people. And this is a theme I talk about a lot on these seminars, because again, other people are one of the most difficult thing to deal with, because they're idiots a lot of the time, aren't they? They do ridiculous things. We would never do anything like that. but we bump into them. Of course, they have exactly the same experience of us. We live in a world where we are less aware and tolerant of other people's stuff, and when we bump up against it and it's not how we see the world, it can cause all sorts of trouble. The key thing really to remember about other people is, I don't remember if I told this story, but I'm going to tell it again in case I have, is window cleaning. So with window cleaning, this all comes from when one of my kids was ill, and I had to sit with them. They were quite tiny. Daytime TV was on, and which I wouldn't generally recommend you watch, but there I was watching it, and there's a program about experts, and this particular expert was an expert in just got a message from Jenny about the friend, friend. So yeah, this expert was an expert in house cleaning. I thought this is going to be incredibly dull, but it was really interesting. She said there's a thing you have to do, which is you have to clean windows. And the big problem when you clean windows, clean them on one side, clean them on the other side, go out and clean them on the other side, is the little street smears that you get when you clean a window. So the big problem is when you're cleaning the window and you find a smear, you get rid of the smear, but you find it's actually on the other side of the glass. So you have to go out the house, clean it, and when you go to the other side of the house, you find it's on the other side of the pane of glass, and this is a real problem. And she said there's a very simple solution, which some of you on the call will know, which is when you clean inside, you clean up and down, and when you clean on the outside, you clean from side to side, and then you know instantly which side the smears are on. And you may ask yourself, well, that's very interesting, Phil, but why are you teaching on this interesting call about stress and sleep about window cleaning? Because one of the really important things to do with other people is to distinguish, are the smears on your side of the window or on their side of the window? Because if the problem is, if the grime is on their side of the window, then it's not your responsibility and you can't fix it. So if somebody is being bitchy, then you can't really do much about that. They're going to do what they do, because as we've all tried at some point in our lives, we try to change other people. One of the rules of life is people rarely change. That's not completely true. People change all the time, but they rarely change when you try and make them change. When they decide to change and they get access to decent skills and tools, they can change. But you trying to force change, who's tried to force change on someone in their lives in the past? Maybe a relationship, maybe a family member. My mum, as many people know, drives me bonkers, and my wife often says to me, she's not going to change, I keep on hoping, but she doesn't. So anyone else having to deal with parents and technology at the moment? It's absolutely doing my head in. With all the skills I have at managing my own state, it's one of the things, suddenly not in a good space. So yeah. So we need to distinguish, is the problem on your side or their side? If it's on their side, you can't do anything about it. You can't do anything about the fact they are bitchy, gossipy, difficult. What you then have to do comes back to the serenity prayer, which many of you know I often wave a big flag for, which is change the things you can change, accept the things you can't with serenity, and have the wisdom to distinguish which is which. So putting your energy into trying to change those people who are bitchy or gossipy is just a waste of time. It's not going to work. Instead, put your energy into the thing you can change the most, which is yourself, and ask yourself, okay, a core question, which I recommend you always ask, which is, how do I want to be around this? Or even better, how would I love to be around this? So for those people who've got these particular issues about dealing with other people, you're not going to change your co-workers' behaviour if they're lying or gossiping or bitchy. What you've got to be thinking about is, how do I want to be around this? Is it okay for me to be bent out of shape because they're being a bit tricksy? And the answer is no. So then thinking really, okay, well, what state would be good to bring myself to this situation in? What kind of headspace, what state would I like to be in that will allow me to navigate my way through this in a different way? And spend some time thinking about that. how would I like to be? How would I love to be around these people? And it may be, it's just not fair they're doing this. It's like, that's not relevant. A lot of stuff in life isn't fair. And what's really not fair is when they're being difficult and you're feeling uncomfortable about it. What at least would rebalance it a bit is they're being difficult and you're able to still be healthy and well. That would be slightly more fair. So asking yourself, how do I want to be in this moment, in this space? And there's some interesting states you may not have thought about. One is the state of whatever, or ambivalent. It's like, yeah, that's their life. That's their side of the window. It's nothing to do with me. If you've got kids or had kids, there may be some times when kids say really, really horrible things to you. There may be stuff like, my kid when he was young said, I hate you, I hope you die in a fire, because I wouldn't give him any more ice cream. What did I think about that? I thought, well, that's what he does. He wants ice cream. He's annoyed about it. I don't take it personally. It's just stuff that kids say. We're able to kind of filter it and go, I'm not going to take that on. What if we could do the same with this? Because actually, to some extent, when you think about it, a lot of these people are behaving in quite ungrown up ways. And maybe, as we talked about before, we need to bring some kindness, some compassion, some acceptance, being able to just separate a little bit, be there, but not in a way where we can be attacked in the way that we've allowed ourselves to be attacked. Okay, so let's get some of these other little questions up. Oh yeah, the other one I was going to talk about was about jealousy, which is an interesting question. And a really tricksy one again. I don't know if anyone's ever been on the wrong side of this, where you've been with someone who's jealous, or you've found yourself uncontrollably jealous about someone who either has given you cause to be jealous or has given you no cause. So when this kind of stuff happens, it's quite weird because it takes us into mental and, interestingly, neurophysiological places we don't normally go to. Where we feel churned up, we feel angry, we feel all sorts of emotions that rationally we kind of go, it doesn't make any sense, but we feel compelled to be that way about it. I was having a little look before the call about one of the things I always do when somebody mentions an emotion like jealousy. So I normally go and look at the etymology of it, which means what is the root of this? Where because what you've got there is a little bit of archaeology. Humans have been experiencing these emotions for forever. So how have we understood them? What's our history? Our shared hive mind history of trying to deal with this kind of stuff. And the word jealousy has its roots in the word zeal. Feeling so sometimes the word jealous back in the day meant being really, really passionate about something. It didn't have a negative connotation of being jealous because you fear something's going wrong or it's not within your control. And the other thing I found was in Swedish, they call it, I hope no Swedes are on the call because my pronunciation is going to be awful, but they call it a fatuga, which means black sick. So that's how they describe it, this whole idea of this poison within you. With jealousy, it's very tricky because what it does is it gives you a chance to rethink everything that's happened in a negative way. So if somebody doesn't call you or is late home, you start to generate a whole narrative and story that may not have any basis in fact. And there's a second part to jealousy, was if you keep on doing that, people start to not like it. They start to not tell you the entire truth because they don't want to upset you, or they start to feel controlled, and it doesn't generally work in relationships. So what do you do with jealousy? Well, the first thing you need to do with jealousy is really notice that it's going on, that your response to these events is not healthy for you or your relationship. And then you need to do some work on it. Now, there's some stuff you can do on your own with it, by sitting in a place of calm acceptance of yourself and your emotions. If you know anything about thanking processes, so resolving it in a conflict, then starting by acknowledging what's going on and being kind to yourself for the fact this is happening. but it may well be something that you need to seek some professional help from. Not like, crazy long-term psychotherapy or psychoanalysis. It's probably something you can resolve relatively quickly in maybe an hour or so. But it's quite a complex thing, so it may be something you need to do some proper work with. Now I've got some more messages coming up here. What have we got here? Okay, good. Interesting one. Did the lightning process a few years ago. My health is a lot better. However, some people in my life keep on treating me like I'm still sick. Advertising SPO direct at the moment here. So how can I get them to stop? Well, first problem you've got is trying to get anybody to do anything differently is troublesome. You can, it depends on your relationship with them, but you can ask them, you can explain to them, but quite often people will forget. If you can explain to them why it's important to do it, then that will help. And one of the best things is just to be well. When you're well, they'll stop doing it. The more well you are, the more they go, oh, I need to take care of them. But it does depend a little bit, Lisa, on your relationship to them as to how frank a conversation you can have. But it's something we often teach people on the final day of the lightning process. We say, we need to really make sure that when you go back into the world well, happy, healthy, moving forwards in your life, people will still see you as you were, for the last few months, few years, where you've been in a certain space where they've been trying to help you in a certain way, and they will need to update their understanding of you, and again, to be kind as you do that. Lucinda, I find I still feel hurt by people with body sensations, even though my cognitive understanding realizes it's other people's stuff. Yeah, the body doesn't know the difference. What do I do? There's a lot of techniques you can do on this. So this is where cognitively you're going to go, it's their stuff, but it's still, you still accept it and take it on. You probably will need to have a look at your internal conversation and find out, what are you saying to yourself? How are you processing this? And once again, make sure your internal conversation is really kind, where even if you find yourself going off at the deep end and feeling physically upset by it, to just take a few moments to kind of go, okay, I recognise this is happening. I reckon it's not reasonable, but it comes from some old pattern. So I choose to be kind to myself as I allow my body almost to catch up with me. And the other thing that's often very useful to do, and this is a big part of NLP and the lightning process, is to spend some time when you're not even in that situation. So let's say this is a person that's troublesome for you and you're going to bump into them later on. Before you even meet them, to just rehearse how you want to be, to really connect with what it feels like, so that when you go and meet them, if they do their stuff, which they probably will, that you're prepared to deal with it in a new way rather than it surprises you and you kick off in the old way that you have. Hope that's useful. Sarah says, I read a book this afternoon called Perfectly Imperfect, and it just talked about drishti, focus. Christy, I wonder if they really not accept that you've changed for the better. Yeah, I'll tell you what, with the victim thing, I might talk about victims next time, because that's one of my favourite topics, the drama triangle. Jealousy, comparing yourself to somebody else, yes, that can be a big issue, Claire. My good friend Sandy Newbigging, we shared a stage, we've done it a few times, but he talks a lot about humans being like a comparative machine. What they spend all their time doing is going, are they better, worse, the same, different from me in some way? How do I measure up? And we spend so much of our time doing that, and maybe one of the things we just need to do is drop that. Claudine, hola, ¿cómo estás? Maybe jealousy has to do with low self-esteem. Quite often it can be. And that's not very good for relationships. If you're in a relationship and you constantly, again, it's slightly comparative, slightly comparing yourself to other people out there or your partner, and you feel less than them, then it's not really a relationship of equals. And having equality is really, really essential for a good, healthy, fulfilling relationship. Hi, Sam. Edward says, check out the work of Lucas Dirk, the lovely Lucas Dirks, on Social Panorama, about how we move things around in space. Yeah, very interesting stuff. Excellent. and called the lovely Connie Ray Andreas, who we of course should be hanging out with this weekend, but she's stuck in America and we're stuck here. And Core Transformation, which many of you know, was pivotal to a lot of my work. The kind, compassionate approach of Core Transformation. Oh, we got Tabiso here as well. Thank you very much for coming in from your own session. And excelente. So currently I'm learning Spanish. Yo estudio español ahora. So I'll just throw that into. So I did promise that we would do some work on calming and sleeping. So that's what we're going to do now. So what I'd like you to do is to take a few moments, as I just said, to think about something that you want to feel more calm, more relaxed about, or you want to feel sleepier, more at peace. And just allow yourself to just notice what that is. At a kind of distance, we're not that interested in doing anything more than just observing it. And then what I'd like you to do is to just allow yourself to lean back comfortably in your chair, put down your gin and tonic, Renara, and just breathe just for a moment. And then just follow the sound of my voice. And for many of you who know, there are a number of things I do when I help people to relax deeply. And some of them are quite obvious in that my voice slows down and the pitch becomes lower as we start to become more relaxed. And the reason for this is that your brain has an ability to tune in to whatever's going on around you through these mirror neurons that we have. So the more I become slow and calm, the more you'll find that your nervous system starts to settle. But there's other things that other people know who've studied with me over the years will recognize, and you can allow your conscious mind to notice some of those things, some of those clever and interesting things, because whenever we do this, we actually communicate on about 4 or 5 different levels. But you don't need to consciously be aware of that, because your unconscious mind is paying attention to all the words I'm saying, and also to the spaces in between the words. And as you do, I'd just like you to notice how your shoulders can just let go. How your breathing is now just a little bit more, even more, feeling the way that you already recognized that it needed to. And I'd like you to listen to a story about someone I mentioned earlier, Milton Erickson, who was an incredible speaker, physician, psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and healer. And what was extraordinary about him was he didn't need to do very much to help people to deeply, deeply relax. He would say to people, you know, all you need to do right now, he'd say to them, is just to allow yourself to pay attention on a new level, he'd say. And he told a story once about going to a bell making factory. And you may not know that Erickson had polio at an early age, and later on probably had a stroke and was only able to move a little bit, but he was still able to communicate extraordinary levels of depth, just with his voice. And when he was a young medical student, he was wandering down the street, and off to one side he noticed the arch of a bell factory, somewhere where they made bells. And as he said, because you're an interesting and intrigued kind of person, decided to go on an adventure. He went down the alley, never been there before, but he found his way. And there at the bottom of the alley he saw the doors open to the factory, and he stepped through, and the noise inside the factory was really quite loud. You can be curious why it was loud. Well, in a factory, sometimes when it's busy, hammering and clanging, shaping metal, bending it, forging it, because even the most solid, hard metal, when you heat it to the right temperature and the right environment, becomes fluid, flows, can be stretched, shaped any way that you want. You just have to have a mind to do it. And he did, as he walked through the factory. He saw all the workers being busy, and he went to the office of the manager and he said, "I'm very interested in all sorts of things." And the manager said, "So you're very interested in all sorts of things, are you?" He says, "Yeah, I've seen your factory, and I don't know how you guys," looking down at the shop floor, "see people communicating to each other and hearing each other and speaking. I can't hear them at all. There's all this noise. It's just impossible. I just don't understand. And I'd like to explore this a bit more. Would it be okay if tonight I came and put my sleeping bag just somewhere out of the way, somewhere near one of the factory machines, just to see what it's like?" And the manager said, "Okay." So that evening, much later, when the night was falling, Ericsson walked down to the factory, and there he found himself a little place out of the way where he could just gently and easily snuggle down, settle down, almost as easily as a cat resting in the warm sunshine. Just feeling that calm, easy feeling. And initially, of course, it was a little bit less quiet than he wanted it to be, but he found with time, just being still, much like the water, the sound started to wash over him. And before he knew it, his body became more and more comfortable. his mind settled and calm. And he reached that really interesting place, the doorway between being not asleep and being really sleepy. And he kind of thought to himself in a distant way, it's really interesting to feel this sleepy sleep feeling. And as he thought this sleepy sleep feeling, found himself just gently, comfortably drifting. And before he knew it, the sun streaming in through the dirty windows of the factory. And one of the workers, who didn't know he was there, stumbled over him and cursed him for getting in the way. And Erickson said, sorry. The guy said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I was just doing an experiment to see if I could understand a little bit more about how the brain works. Said the man as he wandered off. And at that point, Erickson suddenly realized and so as you allow yourself to learn what it is that's important for you, how this very particular story relates specifically and directly to that thing that you were thinking about making change with, now as you think about it, how that shifts your awareness of the resources you have available to you, and how bringing yourself with this new understanding allows you to navigate and move through all sorts of environments, spaces and places, allows you to deliver a whole range of new ways of being, new actions, behaviours that really fulfill on the innate capabilities you have within you. Those skills and qualities that allow you to do all the incredible things that you've done over the years. And how recognizing who you are and what you're capable of reminds you of the things that are really important for you, whether it's what you do or where you put your attention or who you hang out with, how you spend your time, or what your values are in terms of this is important to me, and how that reignites that deep familiarity that we all have, do we not, with actually who we really are inside. Sometimes we forget, we wander off one way or another, but in those moments of clarity, reconnecting with who we are, who we know ourselves to be, and how by doing that allows us to recognize what we can bring into the bigger picture, the lives of others, the passions, the excitements. And by connecting with that, we feel a sense of, you know what, maybe what I need to focus on isn't those things that I used to think were pressing or important. Maybe instead, I just need to reconnect, to bring myself in each and every moment from this new place. And notice when I do this, how much easier it is to find my way. And you know, as Erickson wandered back up the street, he said, you know what? There's always something. There's always something you can learn. And sometimes you learn these things in the most unusual places when you weren't even expecting to recognize that there were things you thought you'd forgotten, that you remember, that you realized a long, long time ago you'd already remembered. And so as you allow yourselves to gently and comfortably bring yourself back to this room, to this waterfall, knowing that just by listening to this and switching yourself into a different state, it has at least two very powerful and important processes. First is your whole body just switches down from maybe some activity to calm, parasympathetic, nurturing, healing, thoughtful recovery you. But the other thing that's really important is not only is there a temporary effect of getting into that state, it's quite nice. Let me know if you're coming back to the room how it felt to go through that process. But the other thing that's really important is that the more you practice getting into this state, activating this neurology, then the easier it is to re-access that again and again. And this starts to become your default setting. This starts to become who you are because of doing it so often. Behaviors that we practice become permanent. So just by spending a few moments calming, refocusing, you will allow yourself to develop the neurological muscle of how to be even better going forwards at doing this. So, we're about to close, but before we do, does anyone have any questions that they want me to either answer if I can in the last few moments, or to something we can save for next time we meet, which interestingly will not be next week. It will be in 2 weeks' time. So I'm going to skip a week. So I've got some stuff to do next Tuesday. I'm sure you'll miss it. Okay. Great. My pleasure, Mary and Sarah and Fleur. Thank you for the comments. I'm glad you like it. And Edward. So, those of you who are familiar, like Sarah and Edward and Jenny, you will have heard a very different version of that story from everybody else because of the various linguistic flourishes that were going on. And Margaret. So guys, great to see you, and I will catch up with you in 2 weeks. In the meantime, if you want to know more about, where are we going? There we go. If you want to know more about how to help yourself to sleep, then I'd really recommend getting one of these audio programs. This one, according to the screen, is, I think, is it $8.99 or $9.99? I can't see, but it's less than a tenner. And it goes on for about 40 minutes. It's me talking you into a deep sleep. And in fact, I think I've said this before, sometimes when I can't sleep, I play this to myself, and even though it's me and I know what I'm doing and I know what I'm going to say next, I never listen, I never get to the end of it, because it's very, very good at helping you to shift into a different state. So if you're interested in that, just go to the usual place, philparker.org, and grab yourself a lovely deep sleep audio download, which you can get on iPhones, Android and computers. Lovely to see you guys, and I feel very honoured to have some extraordinary practitioners on the course as well. So thanks for hanging out with us. I'm sure you have lots of other things to do. Lovely to see you guys, and it's a shame we're not meeting up this weekend at the ANLP conference as we have done for the last few years. So take care of yourselves, and oh, you can't see me anymore, can you? There I am, back in my blue room. Good to see you, and sleep well. See you soon. Bye now.